All right.
All right, guys. Hi, I'm Esther Lee, Christine's sister-in-law, but also a licensed marriage and family therapist. Thanks for having me here today. I was actually I was pleasantly surprised to hear that some of you guys are interested in becoming a therapist. Um, I'm passionate about what I do. I love what I do. And I want you to know that this is the kind of work that could have direct impact on people. And it is such a growth oriented work that it's something that becomes very meaningful for you too. It's not like just a job that you do, but something that's a very integrated part of who you are and what you do. So I like that part of being a therapist. Um, oh, you went ahead.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
So let's look at a couple different areas in which where places where you might see mental health professionals. Next slide.
Mm.
You might have seen therapists in all of these areas as a school counselor, social workers, psychologists, psychiatrists, and marriage and family therapists. Um, all of these professionals will consider themselves therapists, but we all have different scopes of practice, and what we do might look a little differently and how we interact with people. So we're going to look more specifically at what marriage and family therapists do. Marriage and family therapists work in diverse job settings. As a therapist, you could be in a school as a school counselor. You could also work in a medical setting, like end of life issues and facilitating grief and loss counseling. You could also be a therapist in a foster care system or adoption centers, church, ministry, private practice, or DMH site. And DMH stands for Department of Mental Health. Some marriage and family therapists go into teaching. You could be teaching in an academic setting or a ministry setting, like at a church. And some become speakers in conferences. And because of what we do a lot of listening and we gather stories. Often writers might consult a therapist for their own writing. And I have consulted for TV shows and writers who have published books. So, or they become writers themselves because we do hold a lot of stories. And these are stories that are inspiring and motivating, that are worth telling. Some therapists end up as consultants for large corporations within the HR department, and HR stands for human resources. So they work with people within the organization, and they might do leadership training, workshops, or they might have like a one-on-one counseling session with people who are having challenges in their workplace. As a therapist, we get to see a diverse population of clients and diagnoses. Obviously, I think these are the more commonly known mental health issues, like addiction, depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, OCD. But we also work with developmental issues, stage of life issues like childhood issues, teenage, issues, could be gaming addiction, um, could be social issues, relational issues, but also issues within the intergenerational part of the family. There are differences in different generations, and I'm sure some of you guys might have experienced the conflicts within that. And those are all areas that we cover and that we work with. And I also wrote that we work with developmental and gender and sexuality issues. Okay. So training and education, this is what you need to become a licensed therapist. You need a college degree, and often the prereq courses are stats, psychology, and sociology. But when you are applying for a master's program, not all schools require them. So even if you do something completely different in your college years, like you might be a business student or you might be a political science student, it's okay, because the field of psychology is so broad, and you could kind of come into it from so many different angles. I mean, I have seen accountants become therapists, and bankers become therapists, attorneys become therapists. So this is one of those fields where your experience just can be integrated as you become a therapist. But you do need to go to a master's program, grad school, and get a master's in science in MFT. There's some good programs around your area. And I think even CSUN is, I think, in your, oh, wait. You guys are not in the Valley, right?
They're kind of all over Southern California.
Okay. Well, there are a lot of MFT programs in Southern California. And I could tell you more if you guys are interested. The licensing process after graduation takes about 2 to 6 years. You need 3,000 clinical hours, meaning you have to be client facing. And you also need supervision hours and a lot of training. After you finish those 3,000 hours, you apply to sit for 2 board exams. One is a legal and ethical exam, and the other one is a clinical exam. And it's regulated by the Board of Behavioral Sciences. So when you graduate from an MFT program, grad school, and get into a work situation, your salary range is actually pretty broad, but this is just an MFT in an agency setting. At the entry level, they'll offer you about 45 to 50K per year. And this is based on a 20 to 25 client workload in a week. You'll be working probably 40 to 50 hours a week with all the paperwork, training, and supervision on top of the 20 to 25 clients that you have to hold. If you are bilingual, on top of 45 to 50K, they'll give you probably, I think it was about 5,000 bonus. And this is pretty general in any agency settings. After you get licensed, you'd be offered more than 60K in any agency setting. And then you could work up. There's a graph to show you how there's a salary increase. And there's actually a huge salary range between an MFT in an agency setting and an MFT in a private practice setting, or an MFT in like a medical setting. So I try to do a quick comparison in the next slide. And it's there are a lot of words, but just to point out a few pros and cons. In an agency setting, you get a lot of training that's covered and paid for. So that's great. And you have a community of people of over like 20, 30 people who could work with you on different cases. In a private practice setting, you might have a few others within your group that you could work with. So it's the community might feel smaller, but you do have some training that's available. The pros, the good thing about being in a private practice is that you get to see the clients that you want to see, and clients tend to be much more highly motivated because they're paying for their own services, versus in an agency, you might get a lot of court mandated clients. And these are clients who might have support to get those sessions paid for. Also, in a private practice setting, you do have a lot more flexibility, and the pay is much higher. And the pay range for the private practice could be anywhere from 50 to 150, or even more than that.
So in this slide right here, it looks like it's capping at 68. This is more for an agency, but if you're in a private practice, it can go up to 150.
Yeah, I would say that's kind of on average, private practice setting, if you have a full load. Mm-hmm. But see, the thing is with private practice, a lot of people don't have to do a full load of about 20 to 25 clients. They might just cap it at 15 to 18. Mm-hmm. And they'll still make more than people in an agency setting.
Right, because they can charge a lot more per hour.
Right. So in an agency setting, you might be paid anywhere from like 25 to 65 an hour, like per client, right? On average. But generally for a private practice setting, you could charge anywhere from 80 to 200 an hour. And that's the general range.
We just lost your, okay.
Yeah.
And any questions so far, you guys? I know usually Ellie is here to raise her hand, but she's not here today. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. All right. So what it looks like when I'm at work, I'm actually at my office. This is my office. When I come to my office, and this is, I'm going to do more of the private practice versus the agency setting. So in an agency setting, you go in and you have about 6 hours of clients per week, per day, 5 days a week. And you'll schedule for appointments. You'll call them or email them. And you'll have in-session time, which is 15 minutes per session. And this is my favorite part. Sorry. While you're in session, you do a lot of listening, a lot of learning. And I find that as a therapist, there's a bit of a leadership component, because as you're listening and getting to know your client, you learn to lead and guide and kind of gently push them towards where they need to go. So generally, I would say it's a lot of listening, learning, and leading. And you do about an hour or two of paperwork. That could be clinical notes, billing, writing your emails. And once or twice a week, you'll have staff or supervision meeting. And that's where you get your training and accountability. And there are other collaterals, like having to call if you're working with a child, you might call the parent and have a quick check-in. Or if you have a client who's working with a psychiatrist, you might call the psychiatrist to do a check-in to see whether the medication is working out okay. And you consult with other people to coordinate care. In private practice, what's different is that you might not see 6 hours of client every day. You might do like 2 to 3 days of 8 hours each, and you're done. And those are things that you could kind of work on based on your own schedule. So there's a lot more flexibility in a day of a therapist in a private practice. Okay, so what I love about being a therapist, I mentioned a few of this before, is that as a therapist, I'm in a community of growth-oriented people. And there's usually, as therapists, we could just call up another therapist and we could seek support. Therapists tend to be good listeners and good friends. So that's always, I think I see that as a positive. And I also get to work with clients who are inspired, motivated, and resilient. They might not come in as a resilient person, but I think when they come in, what they're telling me is that they want to heal, they want to change, and they want to see those changes happen within our work together. So yeah, I find that it's a great privilege and a blessing that I get to see those changes right before my eyes. People can heal, and I do get to see those changes. I think often in life, you might find that, man, things just don't change. Like, I'm constantly stuck here. You might find yourself in patterns that you don't like. But with help and with somebody who could journey with you, things can be very different. When I work with an individual or a family, I love that what I'm doing is directly impacting the community, because as this individual or this family becomes healthier, I see that they go out into the community and they transform what's around them. I have seen that often, and that's one of the things I love about being a therapist. I've mentioned this for the private practice component. It's really good for family life. If you want to have a good work-life balance, this is one of those jobs where you can pursue that. And again, as you see the clients grow and as you work with therapists around you and people who care deeply around you, there's a lot of personal growth, and you could see that within yourself. Okay. So as students, what you guys can do, I often say, you know, one of the best things that you can do for yourself is to be present in your life. Engage in your life and live your life fully. You don't have to have a lot of things on your resume to become a therapist, but if you are fully engaged and if you're aware of yourself and if you're aware of relationships around you, that's probably one of the best things that you can do for yourself. You could also delve into an area of your interest. It could be music, it could be sports. You know, some people do sports psychology. That's actually an interest of mine as well. Could be drama therapy, art therapy. I mean, there's so many different ways in which you could pursue being a therapist. So delve into something that you're passionate about, gain a lot of experience, and that could maybe become an area of specialization later on. Do your own work if you can, and if there's an opportunity to do so, find a therapist, understand who you are, and have a more sturdy narrative for your life. That's probably one of the best things, best prep and training for becoming a therapist. Actually, in grad school, this is something that is required. They do require that some graduate programs do require that you have your own therapist and do your personal work. In the now, I think what's important is that you pursue healing, growth, insight, and acceptance of yourself. And if they're not resources available, that's okay. Look around you, find a mentor who could join your journey and be intentional about your life. Next slide. And so after having heard what I've shared, ask yourselves this question and see if this is an area, this is the field that you want to pursue. Do I love learning and growing? If there's a desire for you to find things out, if you're curious about things, about people and relationships, you know, this might be the field that you might want to look into. I'm interested in relationships and growing the emotional muscles. Do I have deep desire to help and nurture people's growth? I'm curious about life and people. I'm not scared to experience and engage in conflicts. As a therapist, you do see a lot of conflicts and chaos. So you don't have to be resilient against with those conflicts right now, but this is definitely an area in which you're going to be growing as a therapist if you pursue this path. Right, I think that's it.
All right.
Do you guys have any questions?
Yes. Throw out those questions. Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Danny.
Would you say like I
This
know
is
that
Danielle.
like yeah, this is Danielle. I know you said that you learn a lot from being a therapist, like with listening to people, but would you say you get like surprised a lot by the stuff that you learn?
Do I get surprised by the things that you hear? Is that what you're asking?
Like the things that you learn, maybe new perspectives or something?
Yeah, I would say the first couple of years as a therapist is probably there's the steepest learning curve. You learn a lot about yourself, but you learn a lot about human nature. You learn a lot about pain and what is out there in the world. So the first 2 years, there's a lot of deconstructing, a lot of breaking down, a lot of new lenses that you have to add to what you already have. I see Jacob. Do you ever face problems to talk with another therapist? Oh, do I see an, yes. A lot of therapists do have their own therapists, and that's also an important part of our work, that we do our own self-care. We have to tend to the self of the therapist, and a lot of therapists would believe that if you're not doing your own work, we're not doing any good to the clients that we work with. We need to be healthy as an individual in order to help people towards that journey of wellness.
That's a great question, because actually I feel like hearing all these problems of other people would like make me really depressed and anxious, and like I wouldn't be able to sleep at night. So I feel like you definitely need a place where you can kind of get support or have it not completely overwhelm you.
Right. And also therapists do have support groups and consultation groups where, we meet weekly or monthly to support one another. So this is definitely one of those fields where you're not left alone. If you are a lone therapist, you will burn out very quickly. You have a lot of people in your community. Like, that's basically what I want to share.
I
Any
have
other
another
questions?
question.
Go ahead, Danny.
Would you, okay. Sorry, I like immediately forgot what I was gonna say.
That's okay.
Like when you're like doing your whole therapist thing, like somebody like do you like overanalyze things in your life because of your job? Or
So,
is it like, oh, go on.
This is actually a very good question. And as MFTs go through their grad school program, everyone is diagnosing. It's like the funniest thing. But we kind of laugh about it because we know that everyone has some sort of pathology. Like, everyone's broken and everyone's faulty in some ways. That's, I think, where all of us come to a certain level of acceptance of ourselves. Like, oh yeah, like I have a little bit of that. I have a little bit of this too. And that's an important part of becoming a therapist, because once you're able to receive that and accept those areas of your life and those characteristics even within your own life, you might have better perspective about other people's stories and their experiences, and you might not be as judgy or quote unquote analytical all the time. Does that answer your question, Danny?
Yeah, it does.
You're kind of doing that weird vibrating voice.
Sorry. Here,
Question from Emmy: how would somebody go about getting a therapist?
Getting a therapist, I could leave, you could search online or ask somebody. So this is why I think it's important to have a mentor. Christine was a mentor for me when I was in high school. And she actually shared so much of her life with me that I had new lenses for my life. That's important. If you have mentors in your life, you could always go to them for things like this, right? Like, I'm going through these challenges in my life. Like, do you know where I could get more help? They might be able to connect you to a therapist. You could also look online. You could also ask Christine. I could give her a list of resources where you could get started.
I know our school has a whole list as well. We have like free counselors available, and then we have ones probably that we can recommend that are private practice. I know when I worked at a school, we had a counselor, counselor therapist at our school. And I don't actually growing up, my mom used to always tell us kids we should go to see somebody to talk to, because I think I mentioned earlier, my dad had an addiction problem. He was an alcoholic. And so my mom felt like because we had grown up with that, we were going to have a lot of issues, which is probably true, that, you know, that kind of affected us. But as kids and even as young adults, we're like, I'm fine. I'm not an alcoholic. You know, I love my dad and, you know, all of that. So we never really like pursued therapy. And then because Esther married my brother and she just was like so pro therapy. And then I think she convinced my brother to go to therapy because they had to do it for like the marriage component of her getting her license. And my brother, who would never, never, never go to therapy, was actually paying like over $100 an hour for therapy for her training. And he would come back and say it was the best thing ever. And for my brother, who like is such a, I will never pay for that kind of thing. And, you know, for him to kind of be such a proponent, that was what encouraged me. Once my kids were older, and I mentioned it in the little Padlet, I was fine. I never felt like I had any issues. But once my kids started getting like around 5, I felt like I was getting mad at them like more than I should. I wasn't like abusing them or anything, but I was like, I would just find myself like really angry, and it kind of like scared me a little bit. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna like turn into my mom, because my mom was kind of angry. Not all the time, but she's kind of angry. And so I was like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna like repeat the cycle. And so because Esther had married into our family and they were all like pro therapy, I like decided to check it out. And after that, I'm just like, it's not a big deal. And I know Ellie wrote on her thing, she's not here today, but she said, I probably won't ever go to therapy. I don't plan on, you know, having therapy. And I feel like it's really not it's a great thing. It's just like saying, I'm going to go talk to somebody who can give me better advice than I can give me myself on my own right now. And so, yeah. And so when my school had a therapist, I would sometimes corner her when I had some issue going on. And unfortunately, it's usually with my mom. And I'd be like, this is what happened. What do you think? And she would just kind of like hear me out and give me like a third person perspective. And that's basically all it is. It's so helpful.
Like what Christine said, if you feel that there's a pattern that you're beginning to see in your life that you're not happy with, or areas in which you want to see change, but you feel helpless, like, you know, it feels like it's something that you cannot control. Somebody could come alongside you and do that long journey with you. You know, you don't have to do that by yourself. And therapists are good listeners. First of all, we won't preach or judge or, you know, determine that you're a certain kind of a person and put you in a box. But I think the therapist approach is that really, like, when you come in to see a therapist, they'll listen and learn about you and study you well, so that you can be held in a safe place so you could heal.
I wanted to ask Erica. So you said that you didn't have a good experience. Do you mind elaborating on that? Because that's very common too. I've heard of people who go to therapy and they don't like it, and so they stop.
Yeah, my experience was kind of bad because at first I didn't know that there was kind of different types of therapists, and what I was looking for was like a secular therapist. And when I went, the person just tried to convince me that I need to find God, and that was just not what I was looking for at all. Right. So yeah, I tried to be really open to it, but it wasn't helping me. So it made me have the mindset that all therapists are like that. But then I decided that, I would like to be one. So I looked more into it, and there's tons and tons of therapists. So yeah, I just needed to find the right one.
That's right. And it sounds like when you went to that session, you didn't feel heard because the message that they're trying to give you was way stronger than what you wanted to tell them.
Yes, exactly.
And when you are looking for a therapist, this is an important thing to think through. Like, sit with how you are with that person, with that therapist, and reflect on whether or not they are able to hold your story and honor you as a whole.
Thank you.
And that was really helpful because my older daughter was looking for a therapist and we found one and she didn't like her. So then we stopped looking for like 6 months and then we decided to try again. And Esther told us, you can try a lot of different therapists because you want to keep trying until you find one that really fits with you.
Right.
And so we actually, but it was hard for my daughter because she felt like each time she had to kind of go through the whole thing and tell her whole story, and she didn't like that. But the third one that she was willing to see was really like she clicked with, and she just felt really comfortable. And she's actually been seeing her for over a year. So I think it makes a difference to really keep looking until you find someone that you feel like is a good match. And we would have liked to find someone who was like a Christian counselor, but it's ironic because we actually found one that was not. And we got the referral through her school. The staff, they recommended this woman highly, and she's been great.
And I might want to clarify that even if you are a Christian and a therapist, as a licensed marriage and family therapist, under the board regulation, you cannot proselytize. So you're not like telling every client that comes in like, all right, your problem is not believing in God. That's not the route that you're going to go as a therapist, even if you're a Christian.
So that therapist probably shouldn't have said that for her.
Or it could be that Erica saw a pastoral counselor, and thought that was a therapist.
She was also kind of, I don't know if this had anything to do with it, but she was also really old. So I don't think she necessarily understood what my existential crisis of my age. I don't think she necessarily understood that.
Yeah. So that's why it's important to see a couple of therapists to see for a good fit. It's a relationship that you want to work on every week. You don't, if it's somebody that you don't like, then probably not the right fit.
Yeah. I completely agree with what was said because I've only been to 2 therapists in my entire life. And the first one that I went when I was like really, really little because a lot of things were happening and it's hard to process things when you're little, especially when it's really complicated. And so I kind of just I didn't even know what to say when I was in there. And we just she just wasn't the right therapist. I think especially for at the time, style of being a therapist wasn't matching with what I was experiencing. It's and that was completely fine. It's just that I didn't really work through anything. And then in my early middle school days, I was it was all hitting me like a truck, realizations of exactly what was happening, And I went to another therapist and I felt and ever since then I've been seeing the same therapist because she's amazing and we just immediately clicked like that. And I feel definitely after my first therapist I was like, wow, maybe therapy isn't for me at all, but then I'm glad that I didn't just give up because it's so nice having a therapist.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that. And I'm glad that you stuck with the process of finding the right person for you. That takes commitment.
Yeah.
Any other questions? She has about 5 minutes left, so I want to make sure if you have a question, you can get that in, or if you've had a good experience or bad experience.
And any other questions about maybe the process of being a therapist, becoming a therapist?
Like, would you say if you have a lot of problems that you've gone through, that makes you a better therapist? Or would you say if you haven't gone through as many? Because like some people, when they've gone through a lot of things, they think I want to help other people because I know what's what it's like.
Right.
But I know you are a great therapist and you haven't had like a lot of the childhood trauma or personal trauma.
Yeah, you know, and we get this question a lot. I think what it comes down to is personal grit and resilience. So there are a lot of people who have gone through a lot of challenging things in their lives, but they're actually working on themselves and healing and overcoming. That would make them a great therapist. But just because you have a lot of experience, if you are still holding on to them, I think how it might come off in a therapy room, if you're still holding on to all of those wounds, all of those experiences, is that you might be projecting and you might be lending the client a broken lens instead of a lens that's more healed or has overcome, you know? So there are therapists who have gone through a lot, who do their own work, and doing your own work and self-care is so important in our field. And they end up being great therapists. And there are therapists who haven't gone through a lot of childhood trauma, and that's my experience. But I think I did have a lot of world experiences to grow empathy, and the empathy and the experiences of my adult life informed, I think, the work that I'm able to do today. And on top of that, yes, like you do need to work on your emotional resilience and grit.
I have one last question. So this is kind of a group of middle school, high schoolers. And I know when I'm in middle school, high schooler, I really had no intention of going to therapy. And even my daughter, we forced her to. What would be a sign that for anyone in this group, like that you would say therapy might be a good thing? Like the fact that I had an alcoholic dad, would that be like a reason for me to go to therapy, even though I felt like I was a good student, I was behaving and all of that? Or anything else? Like what sort of teens do you see, teens and middle schoolers?
So you're asking who would be a good fit for therapy at this age?
Right.
You know, you guys know so much, and you guys are exposed to so much right now in this generation. I think there's probably there could be a lot of confusion about like what is right, what is wrong. Like just even in your decision making, you have questions. If you have a lot of guidance from your parents, that's wonderful. And, you know, there's a study on positive youth development that that says that the research shows that if you have like three parentals outside of your parents, three adults that are good mentors and good adult role models for your life, you might not need to be in therapy right now. But if you feel that there aren't a lot of good adult role models around, and you have questions, just questions about life, questions about what you see, questions about your social atmosphere, and toxicity and areas in which you feel hurt, even for things like that, I think therapy could be a good thing for you, because a therapist would be able to see where you are in your world and be able to provide good counsel and be of good influence to you. And of course, if there are more intense struggles like addiction or abuse, I hope that you could talk to Christine right away. I could get you connected to somebody.
Thank you, Esther. I know that for my daughter, what also motivated her was she didn't want to bring a lot of her issues into her adulthood. And I really encouraged her, you know, whatever things you're struggling with now, you're going to do yourself a big favor by working on them and resolving them, kind of working through them in your teenage years and not having it affect your relationships and your, you know, kind of later life and your, yeah, your future relationships, including your kids, if you ever have them, will thank you because of the work that you're doing when you're younger. I think that's,
I agree.
all right. I think my
Alrighty,
brother
then.
is waiting for you to leave, right?
Yeah. It's great meeting all of you guys. I'm leaving. I left the slideshow with, I left my info on that slideshow. So if you guys need to contact me, tell Christine.
That
And
slideshow is on our slideshow. Yeah. All
okay.
right. Well, thank you.
Bye.
I'm gonna stick around with the rest of you guys, but we'll say goodbye to Esther.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Esther.
Bye. Thanks for having me.
All right. I'm so pro therapy, you guys. You don't
Just
even
found the
know.
unmute button. right when she left. I was trying to get the mouse over there.
Yeah. I hope you guys would. I really hope you guys will consider it if you're like going through anything. Now she's my personal therapist if I have any issues, but it's really, I think the hardest part is sometimes it's expensive and sometimes people don't want to pay for it, but there's a lot that are included under health insurance things. So like my daughter, no, like when I was going, I was paying like $100 some an hour, and that was I don't know, 15 years ago. But she's able to get it through her Kaiser insurance, and it's 25, which is really worth it. So, but you know, if anything, the question is like, you know, it's always worth it to work on things that are going to make your life better, and therapy is one of those. Okay.